Hey y'all, hope you all are having a great day today. So we are here at the Flagler Beach, Florida area on the East Coast, just north of Daytona. We are here at the Bulow Plantation Ruins Historic State Park. This is one of the topics that we have been actually planning to do for a while now in regards to Florida history. So a little bit of planning and a lot of research has gone into this particular topic, and it mostly just boiled down to what I wanted to include. Anyways, let's get started on this. Long before modern communities were established here in the Flagler area, the prosperous Bulow Plantation, known as Bulowville, once stood in what is today, as you can see, the Bulow Plantation Ruins Historic State Park. But before I get too crazy into that, I do want to include some other things. But long before these modern communities that we see today were established here in the Flagler area, the prosperous Bulow Plantation, known as Bulowville, once stood in what is today the Bulow Plantation Ruins Historic State Park. So this is a state park here, and it's actually here being managed by them. So the Bulow Plantation and Mill was just about the largest in the east coast of Florida. At the Bulow Plantation, you will actually find, when you look at some of the stones, the weathered mossy coquina rock ruins of the Bulow Plantation sugar mill and engine house. The Bulow Plantation grew and processed sugarcane, cotton, rice, and indigo. So in 1821, Major Charles Wilhelm Bulow bought about 4,600 acres on a tidal creek, which will later be known as Bulow Creek, and using the slave labor and had cleared about 2,200 acres of land and planted some of the crops I mentioned a second ago. Unfortunately, Major Charles Wilhelm Bulow died in 1823, and his 17-year-old son John, I think it's pronounced Joachim Bulow. For those that may know how to pronounce it better than I do, please do so. He took over the plantation. Now, the naturalist John James Audubon was a guest at the plantation during the 1831 Christmas season. So in 1835, the Second Seminole War had just begun when troops from the United States decided to come to Florida to enforce a treaty that would then require the Seminoles to give up their land and move west. The Seminoles responded by attacking some of the plantations where troops were often stationed. So in 1836, the Second Seminole War unfortunately swept away the successful Bulow Plantation, as well as other plantations in the area. The ruins of the former plantation, which consisted of a sugar mill, a unique spring house, several wells, and the crumbling foundations of the plantation house and slave cabins, will actually show how crazy the Florida frontier was in the early 19th century. So today, a scenic trail leads visitors to the sugar mill ruins, listed on which is listed on the National Register of Historic Sites. The park actually has picnic facilities and an interpretive center that tells the plantation's history. The Bulow Plantation Ruins also has some interpretive signs set up around the ruins. So pretty much we're going to go start walking around now. You probably want to know is for those that may not know, the sugar planting and milling really took off in East Florida after the United States of America had obtained Florida as a territory in 1821. People hoped that Florida could produce sugar for the United States like our neighbor Louisiana. Of some 12, about, I think it's about like 12 sugarcane plantations. But anyways, those 12 plantations stretched from St. Augustine to Cape Canaveral area during this period. The Bilowville, as they're calling it, was actually one of the largest and wealthiest. So there was about 1,000 acres of the out of the 660 or the 6,675 acre plantation was actually used for sugarcane, which is what I found pretty interesting. That's one of the facts that was stated here, which I found pretty cool. Anyways, let's go check out the rest of the area. Now, as I mentioned before, the stones that you see for the structure that was formerly here, it's the coquina rock, so it's quite the ordeal. Now they have some of the area roped off, so you can't go walk on the areas, and I would obviously assume that's to protect the ruins. They don't want people walking all over it, defacing it. So I'm kind of reading the sign here, and according to the sign here, running a successful sugar plantation like the Bulow plantation required a lot of energy. Before the 1800s, sugar mills were largely operated by animal power. Horses or oxen turned the gears that moved the large rollers used to crush cane. By the time the Bulow plantation sugar mill was built in 1831, steam-powered mills were available. These provided greater power and allowed the sugar cane to be produced faster. This building housed the engine that produced steam to power the sugar mill. Now, a pipe carried steam from this building to the second floor of the sugar house, where a large 3-roller cane press was located. And you can see the sugar house just beyond this building. When the sugar mill was not operating, the steam from the boiler house powered the plantation sawmill. So, let's go further in. Now, this is a well right there that supplied water for the boiler that produced the steam to operate the mill's cane crushing machinery. You can, as you kind of walk by certain parts, you can kind of notice that there's some charring on the stone here. That's from the place being on fire, or being put on fire. That's from just the charred marks and stuff, I would assume. So, kind of going further into this. So, the boiler and machinery. A large, long boiler and furnace filled the right half of this room right here. So the back corner right over there, filled the right half of this room. The steam from the boiler was, of course, piped to an engine on the second floor of the building to your right. This engine operated a large gear that turned the rollers to crush the sugarcane. Now, this other area that they have roped off here, this was the sawmill, which was about 18 feet beyond where I am right now. It was run by the same steam engine as the sugar mill when the sugar was not being made. So in this roped off area, or chained off area, excuse me, correction, I'm sure someone's going to say something about that. Now here is another well. They say that this particular one, they're unsure as to the exact use of this particular well right here. Now it's a pretty funky looking tree right here. Wow. Oh gosh. Huh. So along with sugarcane, they also grew cotton, as I mentioned, corn, rice and stuff on this plantation. In addition to some vegetables for their personal use. Livestock or game provided meat for them as well. So to preserve food, they cured the meats and kept food cool in spring houses. Cool water from the spring helped keep the items in the spring house from spoiling. And then slaves on plantations would not typically have access to a spring house to preserve their food. In addition to staples that the Bulow plantation provided, such as cornmeal, they ate, and they also ate vegetables from their garden plots, small game they were able to hunt and kill, and fish they caught. Here is an example of what their spring house may have looked like. So it's kind of like a little popping out there. So pretty cool. So anyways, the sugarcane was placed on a conveyor starting here, right where I'm at right here. And the conveyor, which is about 3 feet wide, lifted it to the roller crushers on the second floor, and the juice ran into settling vats. The crushed cane, called the hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, the Bagus, came out of the opposite side of this building and was hauled away in carts. So now I see some interpretive signs here. The one right there is the cooling vats location right there. The one just behind that is the battery kettle. The syrup kettle is right there. The flambeau kettle, the proper kettle, and we'll go read that one over there in just a second. My eyesight isn't quite up to par today. And that sign says the Grand Kettle. Now the juice flowed from the settling vats on the second floor into the Grand, the largest of the 5 kettles built into the furnace below. The Grand was also the coolest, being farthest from the battery kettle under which the furnace was fired. The chimney draft pulled heat from this fire through the furnace to the heat in other kettles. The heated juice was hand dipped from the larger to the smaller kettle and ended as syrup in the battery, the smallest and hottest, where it reached the strike sugar stage. It was then ladled into a trough and flowed into large wooden cooling vats to harden. After hardening, it was spaded into slices, carried into small tubes to the purgery curing room, and packed into hogsheads, wooden barrels. So getting sugar out of the sugar cane was very hard work. Not only did slaves have to cut the cane exactly where it was mature, they had to crush it and boil the juice as soon as possible in order to get the most and best sugar out of the crop. During the sugar making season, everyone worked around the clock to make sure the job was done right. Here at the sugar house, the slaves placed cut cane on a conveyor belt that carried the stalks to the rollers to be crushed. The cane juice was gravity fed into clarifiers and then into a series of kettles heated by a furnace under the smallest kettle, the battery. We call this system the Jamaica train. The slaves ladled the boiling juice from the kettle to kettle until it finally granulated in the battery. Then they struck the juice and removed it into vats to cool. So after granulating and cooling in the sugar house, the sugar was still not ready to ship out. Although it was granulated, the sugar was still wet with molasses. The slaves scored and spaded this cooled sugar into hogsheads, or large barrels, located in the two curing rooms on either side of the loading area. These hogsheads could hold about 1,000 pounds of sugar. In the warm curing rooms, the slaves placed the hogsheads on boards over cisterns. Open joints in the barrels and tubes made of cane fixed into the hogsheads allowed the molasses to drain out of the barrels and into the containers below, a process that took about 30 days. Once the molasses drained from the sugar, the slaves filled the hogsheads up with more sugar and they were ready to ship. Some plantations, such as Dummit, had their own distilleries to make rum from molasses, but this particular one did not. Here, you might want to pause the video here to look at these numbers here, so you can look at this. As we're coming up another section of this, the hogsheads were kept in this warm curing room for about 20 to 30 days until all the molasses had dripped from the sugar into the cistern located in their recess beneath. The molasses was sold for making rum. The partly emptied hogsheads were then refilled with sugar and stored. So, the last step in producing sugar on the Bulow plantation involved getting it ready to ship north to market. Once the molasses drained from the hogsheads in the curing room, the slaves transferred both the sugar and the molasses to this loading area between the two curing rooms to wait for their journey by wagon to Bulow Creek. If you walk back towards the plantation house, you may notice some of the spaces carved out of the creek bank to your right as you look out over the Bulow Creek. These boat slips held the flats that eventually carried the sugar and molasses down the creek to the Halifax River and onto Mosquito Inlet, now Ponce de Leon Inlet, where workers loaded them onto boats bound for Jacksonville, St. Augustine, and Savannah. So in December of 1835, the war broke out between the Seminole Indians and the United States troops. The Indians were resisting removal to reservations out west. On December 28th, Major Benjamin Putnam and his troops occupied Bilowville against the wishes of the plantation and remained until late of January 1836. Shortly after the troops left, the plantation was burned, we think, by the Seminoles. So the hog sheds were stored on the floor above this room and lowered through an opening onto the wagons below. The wagons left through these archways and hauled the sugar to a landing for shipment by a boat to Jacksonville, St. Augustine, and Savannah. This is just, I can only imagine what this whole building looked like. It's just hard to kind of comprehend what it may have looked like. I guess this was the curing room, purgery. Hey y'all, just wanted to thank you for checking out my video. If you like it, please like and subscribe, and have a great rest of the day.